The chandeliers above the ballroom glittered like 1,000 frozen stars, their light bouncing across walls dressed in gold and red. My son Adrian had rented the grandest hotel in Chicago for his Christmas Eve celebration. Waiters in crisp white shirts floated between marble columns, carrying trays of champagne and caviar. Guests laughed, glasses clinked, and every corner of the room shimmered with wealth. I stood near the center, my hands trembling slightly, not from the winter chill outside, but from exhaustion. Just hours before, I had been on my feet at the pharmacy, counting pills and ringing up prescriptions on my register. I was still wearing the same shoes I had worn through my 12-hour shift. Adrian spotted me and strode across the ballroom, his designer suit catching every flash of the cameras that followed him like moths to a flame. He pulled me close, wrapped an arm around my shoulders, and spoke loudly so everyone could hear. "This is my beloved mother," he announced. "I make sure she's taken care of. She gets $7,500 every month, just so she can live without a worry in the world." The room erupted in polite applause. I felt dozens of eyes turn to me, admiring, envious, believing I was one of the luckiest mothers alive. They saw me as the proof of Adrian's kindness, the ornament to his success. He squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "Smile, Mom. They're watching." I smiled, but my chest ached. His words rang hollow in my ears, because while he bragged about his generosity, I was still working 50 hours a week just to afford my heart medication. My paycheck was $14 an hour. The truth clawed at my throat until I could not hold it in. I looked straight into my son's eyes, and with a voice louder than I had intended, I said, "I am still working the night shift to pay for my medicine. I don't see a single cent of what you claim." The music faltered, and silence cut through the ballroom like glass breaking. A few guests gasped. Adrian's smile froze, but it was Isabella, my daughter-in-law, who turned pale. Her manicured hand trembled as she clutched her wineglass. For a moment the world seemed to stop, and every glittering light above felt like it was burning down on me. I need you to remember this moment because it was the beginning of everything. The moment when I stopped swallowing humiliation and decided I would not be silent anymore. Remember to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below if you want to hear more. Grandma life stories filled with emotion, betrayal, and unexpected strength. I should tell you who I am. My name is Patricia Harlow. I am 67 years old, a widow, and a mother who thought her only son still loved her. I have spent decades working behind pharmacy counters, standing on aching feet, believing that hard work and sacrifice would guarantee loyalty from family. What I discovered that night beneath those dazzling chandeliers was that my image was worth more to Adrian than my dignity. When I looked into his face, I no longer saw the boy I once tucked into bed. I saw a man who had turned me into a prop for his empire. Isabella's icy stare confirmed it. She didn't even try to correct me or soften the scene. She just looked at me as if I had betrayed their perfect illusion, and in that instant I understood. I was not part of my son's world. I was a tool they used to polish their reputation. The applause did not return. Guests whispered into their champagne glasses, eyes darting between me and Adrian. He leaned in close, his smile stretching unnaturally, his teeth clenched. "Mother," he hissed softly, "do not ruin this evening for me." He tightened his arm around my shoulders as though he could keep me still, as though he could trap my words before they slipped out again. But the damage was done. His wife's pale face, the stiff posture of the guests, the sudden awkwardness in the air, it all hung like smoke that refused to clear. I felt exposed, but strangely, I also felt lighter. I had spoken the truth, and truth has a way of cutting through the most gilded lies. I excused myself from the ballroom soon after, retreating to the edge of the lobby where poinsettias lined the staircase. The music resumed, louder than before, desperate to cover the crack in the perfect evening. But the words I had spoken were still echoing in that hall, ricocheting against the chandeliers, clinging to the walls. I could almost hear them whisper back to me, "No more silence." That Christmas Eve, in front of Chicago's wealthiest eyes, my son claimed I lived on a $7,500 allowance. and I revealed the truth, that I was still working 50 hours a week just to afford my heart medication. I didn't know it then, but that confession would set me on a path I never imagined. The cold air bit at my cheeks as Isabella guided me through the tall glass doors that led to the balcony. Behind us, the music swelled again, covering the awkward silence that had lingered after my words. Out here, the city of Chicago stretched wide and glittering beneath a December sky, but the chill I felt did not come from the winter. It came from the woman standing beside me. She slipped her arm through mine as if we were dearest companions, her perfume heavy and sweet like roses left too long in the vase. "Mother," she said softly, her voice flowing like warm honey, "you surprised everyone in there. You really shouldn't work yourself up during such a beautiful evening." Her tone was gentle, but every syllable pressed against me like the edge of a blade. I kept my gaze on the city lights, the frost settling over the rooftops, refusing to look at her. She squeezed my arm tighter. "People admire you, Patricia. They admire your strength, your grace. They envy the life you live." I could not help but laugh quietly, though it came out more like a cough. "Admire me? For what? For wearing out my bones behind a counter so I can buy my pills? For being paraded like a prize mare so Adrian can look like a devoted son?" She turned then, her smile flawless, the kind of smile that photographs love. "Perception is everything," she whispered. "Do you know how much your son has sacrificed to build what he has? And now people believe in his kindness because of you. You should be proud, not bitter." Her words tasted of poison, though they were wrapped in sugar. I finally looked at her, at those sharp brown eyes that never softened. "Proud?" I repeated. "He lied in front of everyone. He said he gives me money I've never seen." She leaned closer, the fur trim of her coat brushing my sleeve. Her voice dropped until only I could hear. "Be careful, Patricia. You're tired, you work too hard, your memory isn't what it used to be. People might think you're confused, and once people start believing that—" She let the words trail off, a thin smile carving her lips. I understood the meaning even without her finishing the thought. She was warning me. She was telling me that if I made trouble, they would make me look like a senile old woman who didn't know what she was saying. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from anger. I gripped the icy railing of the balcony and forced myself to meet her gaze. "I may be old," I said quietly, "but I am not blind, and I am not forgetful." For the first time that evening, her smile faltered. Only for a second, but it was enough. She quickly masked it, patting my hand as though she were comforting me. Of course," she said brightly. "We only want what's best for you." The doors opened behind us, and Adrian stepped out, his breath clouding in the cold. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his voice carefully pleasant. "Perfect," Isabella replied, sliding her arm from mine and gliding toward him. "Your mother just needed some fresh air. Didn't you, Patricia?" I nodded, though my throat burned. They thought they could control the story. They thought they could control me. But out there on that freezing balcony, under the weight of Isabella's false sweetness, a quiet decision began to take root in my heart. I would no longer be silent. As they led me back inside, laughter rose once more from the ballroom, covering the thin crack in their perfect world. No one noticed the storm building inside me. No one noticed that the woman they thought was broken was finally beginning to stand. The ride back to my apartment was quiet, except for the muffled hum of the taxi engine. Chicago's lights glimmered against the frost-coated windows, but I did not see their beauty. All I saw were the reflections of laughter from the ballroom, the clinking glasses, the admiring faces when Adrian had spoken so proudly about me. Those same words were still echoing in my ears, burning me like embers that refused to fade. $7,500, a generous allowance, a life of ease. None of it was true. My hands were folded in my lap, knuckles white, and I kept pressing them together to stop the tremble. I was no stranger to exhaustion, but that night the weight in my chest was something different. It was the heaviness of humiliation, of being paraded like an ornament when the truth was so cruelly different. The taxi pulled up to a row of aging brick buildings on the south side. Streetlights flickered, buzzing faintly, their glow weak against the biting December night. I stepped out and clutched my coat tighter, the thin fabric no match for the wind that whipped down the block. Carrying myself up the narrow staircase, I could hear every groan of the wood beneath my weight. The smell of fried food from a neighbor's apartment mixed with the faint stench of old pipes, grounding me instantly back into my reality. The grandeur of chandeliers and marble floors was gone. This was my world. When I unlocked the door and stepped into my apartment, a stillness greeted me. The place was small, barely more than a kitchen, a living room that doubled as my bedroom, and a bathroom with a faucet that dripped endlessly, no matter how I tried to fix it. I flicked on the light, and the dim yellow bulb buzzed before it steadied. The wallpaper peeled in places, and the radiator hissed, but gave little warmth. It was colder than that grand ballroom, but at least here no one was pretending. Here, the truth was bare. I set my purse on this counter and sat down on the sofa, its springs sighing under my weight. My shoes pinched my feet, swollen from the 12-hour shift I had finished before being dragged into the performance of a wealthy son's Christmas spectacle. I slipped them off and rubbed my arches, wincing at the soreness. On the coffee table lay my old laptop. Its plastic was cracked at the hinge, and the screen flickered whenever I opened it too quickly. Still, it was reliable enough to show me what I needed to see. With slow fingers, I typed my password and pulled up my online banking account. The numbers blinked into view, and my heart sank. $398.72. That was all. I stared at the balance until the digits blurred, as though staring hard enough would make them change. But they didn't. They never did. I clicked through the transaction history. Week after week, deposit after deposit, the same figure appeared, $14 an hour, multiplied by the hours I dragged myself across the pharmacy floor. The paychecks were steady but meager, and never, not once, had there been any sign of the $7,500 allowance my son had claimed in front of his friends, business partners, and the entire glittering crowd. I leaned back, pressing a hand against my chest, feeling the uneven thump of my heart. Not from illness, though illness was never far, but from the deep insult of being turned into a living lie. Adrian had used me as proof of his kindness, as a symbol to polish his empire. The cameras had captured his arm around me, his voice loud and proud. "She gets $7,500 every month." They had applauded him. They had envied me. If only they knew that I was barely scraping by, still counting pills on a register at midnight to afford the medicine that kept me breathing. I shut the laptop for a moment and glanced around the room. The tiny Christmas tree I had bought secondhand leaned crooked in the corner. Its lights had gone out in places, leaving patches of darkness between the glowing bulbs. On the counter sat an unopened letter from the pharmacy reminding me of my schedule. 5 consecutive night shifts after Christmas, 12 hours each. My manager had written, "Merry Christmas, Patricia," at the bottom in blue ink, as though the words could soften the blow. I rubbed my temples and thought back to the faces in that ballroom. The women in their silk gowns, the men with gold cufflinks, the clinking of crystal glasses. Their applause still rang in my head, mocking me. They believed I was cared for, cherished, financially secure. The truth was that I was one accident away from losing everything. One missed shift, one hospital visit, and my fragile balance would collapse. My eyes drifted to the mirror above the sink, where the faint reflection of my face stared back. Deep lines cut across my forehead, my silver hair pulled tightly into a bun. I hardly recognized the woman staring back. She looked tired, worn thin, yet her eyes, my eyes, still held a flicker of something. Anger, perhaps. Or maybe it was the stubbornness that had carried me this far. I reopened the laptop, as though punishing myself by staring at the truth again. $398. No trace of generosity, no trace of a son's love. Just my labor, my aching body, my long nights. I printed the statement and held it in my hands. The paper was thin, almost weightless, yet it felt heavy enough to crush me. I sat in silence for a long time, listening to the radiator wheeze and the city sirens wail in the distance. I thought of Adrian's smile, the way he had squeezed my shoulder, instructing me to smile for the cameras. I thought of Isabella's eyes, sharp and cold, reminding me not to forget what my son had supposedly done for me. They believed they could define my reality with their lies. But sitting there, in my drafty apartment with proof of emptiness in my hand, I knew the truth was mine to carry. I folded the statement carefully and slipped it into an envelope I kept in a drawer. It joined a small stack of bills, medical records, and pay stubs, a growing pile of evidence that my life was nothing like the fantasy they painted. I touched the envelope and whispered to myself, "This is the truth, and it will not stay hidden forever." The apartment felt colder than ever, but in that coldness was clarity. For the first time in years, I allowed myself not only to feel the ache of humiliation, but to hold on to it, to let it sharpen into something else. The apartment was still quiet when I opened the drawer again, searching for the envelope where I had tucked away the bank statement. My hand brushed against a small stack of old clippings I had kept out of habit, reminders of moments that at one time had made me proud. I pulled them out, spreading the papers across the coffee table, and one by one the images stared back at me. Each glossy photo and neatly printed headline carried the same story. My son, Adrian Harlow, the man who built towers of glass and steel across Chicago, and the mother who had supposedly stood proudly at his side. The first clipping was from a business magazine, years earlier. Adrian stood in a navy suit, handsome and confident, the skyline behind him. I was at his side, holding a bouquet of roses he had thrust into my hands moments before the photo was taken. The caption beneath read, "Family at the core, Adrian Harlow credits success to his mother's sacrifice." At the time, I had smiled when I saw it, but now, looking at it under the dim light of my apartment, I realized how little truth there had been in those words. Another clipping showed us at a press conference for a new development downtown. Reporters had gathered, microphones pointing like weapons. Adrian had pulled me forward, draping his arm around me. "I would be nothing without her," he declared to the crowd. Cameras flashed, capturing my tired smile. I remembered the heat of the lights, the ache in my back from standing too long, the embarrassment of not knowing why I was even there. He had told me to wear something bright that day, something cheerful. So I had put on a red sweater, thinking it would make him proud. Instead, it made me feel like a prop placed on stage for effect. There was also the interview on television, a polished segment that aired during the holiday season 2 years ago. The host had leaned forward, smiling warmly, and asked, "Adrian, what inspires you most?" He had glanced at me, sitting awkwardly beside him under the studio lights, and replied, "My mother. She is the reason I work so hard. I make sure she has everything she could ever need." The audience applauded, and I had lowered my eyes, ashamed. Because even then, the truth was that I had returned home after the interview to a fridge with little more than milk and bread. I shuffled through the pile, each image heavier than the last. My son's empire had been built not only on steel and money, but on the illusion of devotion. I was the centerpiece of that illusion, the face of his story. I remembered standing in rooms where I didn't belong, shaking hands with people who looked at me not as a woman, not as a mother, but as a symbol. They saw me as evidence that Adrian was good, generous, grounded. They never saw the calluses on my hands, the bills in my mailbox, the exhaustion in my bones. The sound of laughter from the ballroom replayed in my mind, woven together with the clapping hands from television studios and press conferences. Each moment layered itself over the other until it became unbearable. I rose from the sofa and walked to the small mirror above the sink. For a long time, I stared at my reflection, at the lines etched deep around my mouth, at the silver strands of hair pulled tightly back. I whispered to the woman staring back, "I am not a slogan." The words surprised me. They cut through the silence of the apartment like glass breaking. I said them again, louder this time, my voice trembling but firm. "I am not a slogan." The phrase echoed in the small space, bouncing off the peeling wallpaper and the humming radiator. I thought back to that interview, to the bright studio lights. I remembered the way Adrian had spoken with such ease, weaving a story that charmed everyone in the room. He had made them believe that his success was rooted in love, in sacrifice, in loyalty. And I had let them believe it because I had been too afraid, too tired, too hopeful that perhaps, one day, it might become true. But staring at those clippings now, I understood. None of it had ever been true. I was not cherished. I was not supported. I was useful, nothing more. He had built his reputation on the scaffolding of my silence, and that silence had become the prison that kept me in place. I gathered the clippings back into a neat pile and pressed them flat with the palm of my hand. My fingers lingered on the glossy surface of one photograph where Adrian's smile looked larger than life. I wondered how many people had believed in that smile, how many investors, partners, journalists, and strangers had applauded it. I wondered if anyone had ever seen what I saw, the cold calculation behind it, the way it never reached his eyes. The radiator hissed again, steam rattling the pipes, and I sat back down, the envelope of evidence heavy in my lap. My bank statement, my pay stubs, my schedule. And now these clippings, reminders of the lie that had grown larger than both of us. I pressed them together and thought of Isabella's voice on the balcony, her warning wrapped in sweetness. Be careful, Patricia. People might think you're confused. I closed my eyes and pictured the ballroom again. The chandeliers had glistened above like frozen stars, but beneath their glow, I had spoken the truth for the first time. Tonight had been the crack in their perfect facade. And now, sitting in my small apartment, surrounded by reminders of years of lies, I felt that crack widening. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a different path. One where silence did not protect them. One where my voice carried weight. I had been used for too long. I had been quiet for too long. The thought settled inside me, firm and undeniable. I rose, gathering the papers and sliding them back into the drawer. My hand lingered on the knob as though sealing away years of humiliation. Then I whispered, steady and clear, "No more slogans. No more lies." The apartment was still cold, but for the first time in a long time, I felt something warm within me. The morning after Christmas Eve felt gray even before the sun rose. I sat at the small kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, staring at the papers spread in front of me. The clippings, the statements, the pay stubs, all of it looked like pieces of a puzzle I could not yet solve. My chest still carried the sting of humiliation from the night before, but underneath that ache, something was changing. It was no longer just sadness. It was suspicion. By mid-afternoon, I gathered my things and stepped into the brittle winter air. My breath clouded in front of me as I walked to the pharmacy. Not for a shift, but because I had agreed to meet an old friend there, someone who had known me long before the cameras and the lies. Dr. Elaine Carter was waiting in the back room, sorting pill bottles with the same sharp efficiency she'd had 30 years ago. Her hair, once dark, had gone almost entirely silver, but her eyes were still bright, alert, and kind. She looked up as soon as I stepped through the doorway. "Patricia," she said, setting the bottles aside. "I saw you on the news last night. The party, the speech Adrian gave." She paused, studying me, and then added softly, "You didn't look happy." I sat down on a small stool, my hands folded tightly in my lap. "He said I get $7,500 every month." Everyone applauded, and I stood there, knowing I had less than $400 in my account. Elaine's expression hardened. "Did you confront him?" "I said it out loud," I admitted, "in front of everyone. I told him I'm still working 50 hours a week just to buy my medicine." His wife went pale. Adrian just smiled as if I'd lost my mind. She nodded slowly, her lips pressed thin. "That's not just cruel, Patricia. That's dangerous. If he's making claims about supporting you financially, there must be paperwork. Foundations, funds, something with your name on it." I frowned, unsure of what she meant. "Paperwork?" "Fraud," she said firmly, leaning closer. "If your son is using your name for a charity, a trust, or anything financial without your knowledge, that's not generosity. That's theft. It could even be a felony, depending on how far it goes. The word hit me like a slap. Theft. Fraud. I had lived with humiliation for so long that I had not stopped to consider it might also be crime. Elaine placed her hand gently over mine. I've seen this before, Patricia. Elder financial abuse. It's more common than you think. Adult children using their parents' identities to funnel money, to avoid taxes, to build reputations. And the parents stay quiet, either out of love or fear. I shook my head, my throat tight. He's my son. I raised him. I worked nights so he could go to college. I worked holidays so he could have Christmas presents. How could he? Because he can, Elaine interrupted softly. Because silence protects him. But if you speak, if you investigate, you can find out what he's hiding. I stared at the pills she had been sorting, each one a reminder of the hours I had spent behind a counter just like this, filling bottles for strangers, while my own son turned me into a decoration for his empire. My voice was low, almost a whisper. What if he's made me part of something illegal without me knowing? Then you need to protect yourself, she said firmly. Find out the truth before the truth destroys you. I thought of Isabella on the balcony, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Be careful, Patricia. People might think you're confused. The warning had felt like a threat then, but now it felt like confirmation. They were hiding something. Elaine squeezed my hand once more. You don't deserve this. You deserve peace. But you won't get it by staying quiet. You need to start looking, and you won't be alone. I'll help you however I can. For a long time I sat there, listening to the hum of the fluorescent lights above us, the faint sound of customers at the counter. My heart raced, not from fear this time, but from resolve beginning to take shape. I rose from the stool and gathered my coat. Thank you, Elaine, for believing me, for not looking at me like I've lost my mind. You haven't lost your mind, she said with a smile that carried no judgment. You're just beginning to find your voice. Outside, the wind bit at my face as I walked home. The city looked different, harsher, but clearer too. For the first time, I let myself wonder what Adrian's empire was really built on. For the first time, I let myself imagine opening doors he wanted me to keep closed. That night, as I folded the clippings back into the envelope, I slipped in the latest bank statement beside them. My hand lingered on the stack, and I whispered to myself, steady and sure, I will not be silent. I asked Adrian to meet me at his penthouse a few days later. The request alone had been difficult to make, but he agreed quickly, too quickly, as if he believed he had nothing to fear. The elevator carried me up through endless glass walls until I arrived at a private floor overlooking Lake Michigan. His home was nothing like my apartment. Every surface gleamed, every window stretched wide to capture the skyline. It was a fortress of wealth, and I walked into it carrying only a small bag with the copies of documents I had taken. Adrian was waiting in the living room, lounging on a leather chair with a glass of wine in his hand. He smiled when he saw me, the same smile that had charmed reporters, donors, and investors. "Mother," he said warmly, rising to kiss my cheek. "I was surprised you called. After Christmas Eve, I thought you'd want some space." I sat down across from him, my coat still on, my hands folded in my lap. "I need to talk to you about the foundation, about PH Care." For the smallest fraction of a second, his smile stiffened, but then it returned, smooth and unshaken. He set the wine glass down and leaned back in his chair. "Of course. It's all for you, Mom. It's for your legacy. That's why I named it after you." I reached into my bag and pulled out a folded statement, laying it on the glass table between us. "Legacy? These records say you send me $7,500 every month, but the money goes to IH Holdings, not to me. I have less than $400 in my account. I am still working nights to pay for medicine. So tell me, how exactly is this for me?" His jaw tightened, though his voice remained calm, almost patronizing. "Mother, you must have misread something. You know how complicated these documents can be. Isabella handles most of the details. Perhaps your memory isn't—" "Don't," I interrupted sharply, my voice steady. "Don't stand there and tell me I forgot what I saw. I read every line. I saw my signature on forms I never signed. He blinked, then leaned forward, lowering his voice as if soothing a child. Listen to me. You've been under a lot of stress. Working those long shifts at the pharmacy has worn you down. Sometimes the mind plays tricks. Sometimes it mixes things up. I promise you, I've always taken care of you. I stared at him, at the smooth mask of sympathy he wore. To anyone else, it might have looked convincing. To me, it was insulting. He wasn't answering my question. He was erasing it. Adrian, I said, quieter now, though my words cut sharper than before. I am not confused. I am not forgetful. And I am not blind. Tell me why my name is on a foundation I never agreed to, and why every dollar meant for me is being rerouted into Isabella's company. His smile faltered again. He leaned back, swirling the last drops of wine in his glass before finishing it in one swallow. You don't understand how the business world works. There are tax strategies, investments, protections. Everything I do is to make sure you're safe, that our family name stays strong. But you don't need to worry about the details. That's exactly what I need to worry about, I said firmly. He sighed, setting the empty glass on the table. You're making too much of this, Mom. You've always trusted me before. Why stop now? Haven't I given you everything? The parties, the recognition, the admiration of everyone you meet? People look at you and see a woman who is cared for, who is honored. Isn't that enough? The words burned more than the coldest wind outside. I realized then that he thought my dignity could be bought with applause, that appearances mattered more than truth. I rose from my seat, gathering the documents back into my bag. It's not enough, I told him. I don't need applause. I don't need to be your decoration. I need honesty. He stood as well, his smile gone now, his eyes flashing with impatience. Mother, please! You're tired? Go home. Rest. Don't involve yourself in things you don't understand. Isabella and I have everything under control. I walked to the door, my pulse pounding in my ears. His words followed me like shadows, but I refused to let them settle into me the way they once had. At the threshold, I turned back to him. If you think silence will protect you, you're wrong. I raised you to know better, and now the world will see what I've seen. I left before he could answer, the heavy door clicking shut behind me. In the elevator, I gripped my bag tightly, the weight of the papers pressing against my side. His gaslighting had been clever, practiced, but it had not worked. If anything, it had only confirmed what I already knew. The truth was there, and I had seen it. The night stretched long after my confrontation with Adrian. Sleep would not come. I sat at my kitchen table with the stack of papers laid out in front of me, the copies I had taken from his office. The radiator clanked and hissed but gave little warmth, and outside, snow drifted lazily under the glow of the streetlight. I stared at the documents until the numbers blurred, until the forged signatures seemed to crawl across the page like insects. My son's empire had been built on the hollow sound of my silence, and I knew now that if I kept quiet any longer, it would consume me entirely. I opened my old laptop, its fan rattling loudly as it booted. For a moment I hesitated. What could one woman do against a tower of lies? I thought of Elaine's words in the pharmacy, of Isabella's whispered threat on the balcony, of Adrian's calm voice insisting my memory was failing. Their power had always been in making me doubt myself, and for too long I had allowed them to succeed. My hands hovered above the keyboard. I typed in the name of a forum I had once stumbled upon while searching for articles about elder rights, elder justice. It was a modest website filled with posts from people like me, parents, grandparents, retirees, many of them telling stories of betrayal, of children who had taken their savings, of families who had left them destitute. I had never written anything before, never dared to share my own shame. But tonight was different. I created a new post. The cursor blinked at me, impatient. Then, slowly, I began to type. My name is not important. What matters is that I am 70 years old, and I have worked 50-hour weeks for decades. My son is wealthy, powerful, admired. People believe he takes care of me. Last week he told a room full of strangers that I receive $7,500 a month from him. The truth is I live on $14 an hour, and I cannot afford my medication without working nights. He has used my name for a foundation I never agreed to. He has taken my dignity, and I don't know what else he has taken, but I cannot be silent anymore." I paused, staring at the words. My chest tightened, tears gathering in my eyes. I wiped them away quickly and kept typing. "To anyone reading this, I want you to know, you are not alone if this has happened to you. Silence protects them, not us. I am scared, but I am also tired of being humiliated. Tonight, I am speaking because I refuse to let my story be twisted any longer." I clicked post. For a few minutes, nothing happened. The screen sat still, my words lost in a sea of others. I almost closed the laptop, thinking it had been a useless gesture. Then a notification popped up. Someone had commented. Then another, and another. Within an hour, my story had been shared dozens of times. Strangers replied with their own stories, words of sympathy, messages of encouragement. This happened to my father, too. "You are brave for speaking. We believe you." One message caught my breath. "My daughter drained my bank account when I was in the hospital. Thank you for telling the truth." The responses poured in faster than I could read them. The post climbed to the top of the forum, where hundreds of eyes found it. By morning, it had spread beyond the forum. A journalist had linked it on social media. Others shared it, each adding their outrage, their disbelief. I watched it unfold on the flickering screen. My humiliation, once hidden in the shadows of Adrian's parties, was now in the open. But instead of shame, I felt something else rising inside me, a fierce relief. I had spoken, and the world had listened. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the faint hum of the radiator, the distant siren of a police car rushing through the night. I imagined Adrian waking to find his perfect image questioned, Isabella scrolling through the comments with her steady hands finally shaking. They had used me as proof of their goodness. Now my words were proof of their lies. For the first time in years, I did not feel invisible. I felt seen. Not by the wealthy guests who clapped at Adrian's speeches, not by the cameras that captured his smile, but by people who knew what it meant to be used, to be dismissed, to be silenced. They were strangers, but they understood. I refreshed the page again. More comments, more stories, more voices refusing to stay quiet. My post was no longer just mine. It had become part of something larger. A chorus of those who had been ignored, finally heard. When I finally closed the laptop, the room still felt cold, but I no longer felt the chill alone. The silence that had wrapped around me for years had cracked wide open. My voice was out there, carried by hundreds, perhaps thousands. 2 days after I posted my confession, the small apartment felt different. My old laptop, usually nothing more than a tool for paying bills and checking emails, had become a window into something I had never expected. Hundreds of messages still poured in. I had read every single one, though my eyes stung from exhaustion. Each reply told me the same thing. I was not alone. And more than that, I was believed. That morning, as I sipped coffee from a chipped mug, my phone rang. The voice on the other end introduced himself with a calm confidence. "Mrs. Harlow? My name is Harold Kent. I specialize in elder rights law. I read your post. I'd like to meet if you're willing." I hesitated. Lawyers cost money. Money I didn't have. But before I could protest, he added, "Don't worry about fees. What your son and daughter-in-law may have done goes far beyond a family matter. If the documents are what you say, this could be elder financial abuse, tax evasion, even fraud. I think you should know your options." We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop downtown, one without chandeliers or cameras, just scratched wooden tables and the hiss of a worn-out espresso machine. When I arrived, Harold stood to greet me. He was in his 50s, tall, with a sharp suit that had seen better days, but eyes that missed nothing. His handshake was firm, his voice steady, professional. "Mrs. Harlow," he said, "please sit." I slid into the booth, clutching the bag at my side where the copied documents waited. Before I could speak, another woman approached the table, her leather notebook tucked under her arm. She was younger, maybe mid-30s, with dark curls pulled back and a keen expression that reminded me of someone always ready to catch what others tried to hide. "This is Nina Lopez," Harold said. "Independent journalist. She's been covering cases like yours for years. I thought it might help for you to hear both a legal and a public perspective." Nina extended her hand. "Your story matters, Patricia. People need to hear it, not just the details about money, but what it does to someone when the people they love most use them like this." I nodded, still cautious, but something about her voice carried sincerity. It wasn't pity, and it wasn't curiosity. It was conviction. Harold leaned forward, folding his hands. "You said you have documents?" I pulled the papers from my bag, spreading them across the table. The brochure of PH Care Foundation, the financial statements, the transfers rerouted to IH Holdings, the forged signature. Both Harold and Nina studied them silently for several minutes. The coffee machine hissed behind us, and outside, snow fell in slow spirals against the glass. Finally, Harold tapped the page with my supposed signature. "This alone is damning. If you never signed these, it's forgery. Add the rerouted funds, and we're looking at tax fraud and misappropriation. Using your identity without your consent is criminal. It's not just unethical family behavior, it's prosecutable." Nina scribbled notes furiously, her brow furrowed. "This isn't just a private family scandal. If this is exposed, it hits hard. A billionaire son using his mother as a shield while funneling money through shell companies? People will talk. People will demand answers." She looked up at me, her eyes sharp. "Are you ready for that? For your story to be public?" I felt the weight of her question. The thought of cameras and headlines made my stomach tighten. I had spent years hiding behind quiet endurance. But then I remembered the faces in the ballroom, the applause, the lies that painted me as a woman cared for and cherished. That version of me was already public, only it wasn't real. "Yes," I said softly, then louder. "Yes, if it means the truth comes out." Harold nodded. "Good. Then we start by building a file. I'll need sworn statements from you. Copies of your pay stubs, bank accounts, anything that proves you never saw that allowance. We'll request official records on IH Holdings and PH Care. If we can show money laundering or fraud, the district attorney will have to take notice." Nina leaned forward, her pen poised. "And I'll prepare an exposé, but it needs to be airtight. No gaps, no doubts. The more undeniable it is, the faster it spreads. People need to see not just the crime, but the face of the woman who's endured it. They need to see you, Patricia." For the first time in years, I felt something shift. Not the weight of humiliation pressing down on me, but the sense of others standing beside me, steadying me. Harold with his legal mind, Nina with her determination to shine light on hidden wrongs, Elaine, who had given me the courage to look, Marcus, who had opened the office door, Clara, whose name I did not yet know, but whose presence would soon matter. I was not alone anymore. I gathered the papers back into my bag, my hands steadier than when I had first arrived. The snow outside had begun to thicken, covering the sidewalks in white. As I rose to leave, Harold looked me straight in the eye. "You've taken the hardest step already," he said. "You broke the silence. Now we make sure the law and the truth follow." Nina added quietly, "And once the truth is out there, Adrian and Isabella won't be able to hide behind their smiles anymore." The following afternoon, I sat in a corner booth of a quiet cafe, my bag resting against my side, the flash drive hidden inside. The air smelled of roasted coffee beans and baked bread, comforting scents that did nothing to ease the tension pulling at my chest. Outside, the wind whipped down the street, scattering scraps of snow left from the storm. Every time the door opened, a chill swept through, and my heart leapt, half expecting Adrian or Isabella to stride in. But it wasn't them. Clara appeared right on time, her coat zipped high, her scarf wrapped tight around her face. She scanned the room before sliding into the booth across from me. Her hands trembled slightly as she set a folder on the table. "This," she whispered, pushing it toward me, "is the piece that will destroy them." I opened the folder with careful fingers. Inside was a stack of papers, crisp and stamped with company seals. My eyes caught on one page in particular. It was a contract, an agreement transferring a large sum from the PH Care Foundation to IH Holdings. At the bottom, in smooth cursive, was my name, my signature, except it wasn't mine. I leaned closer, my pulse pounding in my ears. Every loop, every curve of the forged letters mocked me. Whoever had written it had studied my hand carefully. To anyone else, it might look real. But I knew it instantly. My hand had never touched that page. Clara's voice broke through my stunned silence. Isabella orchestrated it. She told me to finalize the paperwork and slip it into the system. When I hesitated, she had another accountant sign off, but she made sure this— she tapped the page sharply— was in the file. They've been using forged contracts for years. That one alone is worth hundreds of thousands. I swallowed hard, the room spinning slightly. And if this comes out? Then your son's empire collapses, she said flatly. Tax fraud, misappropriation of funds, elder abuse, forgery. The DA won't be able to ignore it. I touched the page again, my fingers brushing the false version of my own name. I thought of Adrian's smile, his arm draped around me in front of cameras, his voice steady as he told the world I was cared for. I thought of Isabella's cold warning on the balcony, the sweetness laced with venom. And now, here was the proof. The piece that revealed everything they had built was rotten. Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them away. This was not the time for tears. I looked at Clara. Why did you keep this? Why risk so much? Her lips pressed into a thin line. Because I couldn't stomach it anymore. I thought about burning it, deleting everything, pretending none of it happened. But I knew someday someone would need it. I hoped it would be you. I reached across the table, taking her hand for a moment. Her fingers were icy, but her grip was strong. You've given me more than evidence. You've given me a chance to take my life back. She nodded quickly, pulling her hand back. Then don't waste it. Harold will know how to use this, and Nina will make sure the world sees it. She hesitated, then added, but be careful. They'll come for you when they realize what you have. The bell over the door jingled as a couple entered, shaking snow from their coats. Clara slipped from the booth, pulling her scarf up again. I can't stay, she said quietly. But I'll be in touch. There's more if you need it. Just remember, they're watching everything. And then she was gone, leaving me with the folder, the weight of the forged contract heavier than any stone. I sat in silence, staring at the papers. My name, stolen and bent to their will. My identity, turned into their shield. My dignity, used as currency. I thought of all the nights I had stood behind the counter at the pharmacy, believing that sacrifice guaranteed love. And here, in front of me, was the undeniable truth that it had been twisted into something ugly. I slipped the folder into my bag, clutching it tightly as I left the cafe. The cold air slapped my face, but I barely felt it. I walked quickly, every step echoing with purpose. For years, my silence had protected them. Now, this paper would end that silence. When I reached my apartment, I called Harold immediately. His voice came through steady and alert. Did you get it? Yes, I said, my voice shaking. A contract, with my signature, but it's not mine. There was a pause. Then his voice grew firm. That's it. That's the nail. Keep it safe, Patricia. Tomorrow we meet. Bring everything. Once this is filed, they won't be able to pretend anymore. I hung up and placed the folder carefully in the drawer with the other documents. For a long time I stood there, staring at it. My forged name seemed to burn through the wood, a reminder of every lie I had lived under. But now it would also be the key to tearing those lies apart. The following week began with an envelope shoved under my apartment door. I found it early in the morning, thick and heavy with embossed lettering across the front. From the office of Richard Gallagher, attorney at law. My hands tightened as I slid my finger beneath the flap. Inside was a formal letter, printed on pristine paper that smelled faintly of cologne and ink. Dear Mrs. Harlow, it began, this correspondence is to inform you that your recent actions, including but not limited to publishing false and defamatory statements about Adrian and Isabella Harlow, constitute slander. Furthermore, due to concerns regarding your advanced age, mental state, and capacity to recall financial agreements, our clients are considering petitioning the court for a full psychiatric evaluation. Should you continue these false allegations, we will be forced to pursue guardianship to ensure your safety and well-being. Guardianship. The word blurred on the page as my stomach clenched. They weren't just denying everything. They were threatening to strip me of my independence entirely. If they succeeded, they could control my medical care, my finances, my choices. They would own me, body and soul. I read the letter 3 times, my vision trembling with rage. My knees went weak, and I sank into the chair by the window, clutching the pages so tightly they wrinkled. The humiliation of Christmas Eve had been sharp, but this was different. This was war. The phone rang, startling me. It was Harold. His voice was calm, steady, but I heard the edge beneath it. I read the letter aloud to him, every poisonous line. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. This is intimidation, Patricia. Classic strategy. They want you to back down before the truth comes out. But remember, you have the documents, you have Clara's files, and you have us. Don't let them shake you. What if they succeed? I whispered. What if they take my freedom? What if they convince people I'm not of sound mind? They can try, he said firmly, but they won't, because we'll prove otherwise. The more they push, the more desperate they look. Trust me, Patricia, this letter isn't strength, it's fear. I clung to his words, though doubt still gnawed at me. That evening I showed the letter to Nina, who sat across from me at my small kitchen table, her pen flying across the page as she copied down every line. This is gold, she said, her eyes flashing. Do you realize what this shows? They're not just hiding, they're trying to silence you. This plays terribly in the public eye. People already sympathize with you. If they try to paint you as incompetent, it will backfire. Let me run with this. I'll write the first draft tonight. I wanted to believe her, but my hand still shook as I folded the letter back into its envelope. I imagined Isabella dictating it, her voice smooth and commanding, her nails tapping on the desk as the lawyer typed every threat. I imagined Adrian nodding silently, his glass of wine in hand, pretending this was for my protection. They weren't protecting me. They were protecting themselves. The next day, shadows deepened around me. When I walked to the pharmacy for my shift, I noticed a black car idling across the street, its windows tinted dark. It didn't move when I passed, didn't leave when I stepped inside. Hours later, as I left near midnight, it was still there. That night, I found a plain envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in stark black font. Stop digging, Patricia. My fingers went numb. I stood in the dim hallway, the fluorescent bulb above me flickering, the message burning in my hand. They wanted me frightened. They wanted me silent. Instead, I called Harold again, my voice shaking. They're watching me. They left a note. And he listened without interruption. When I finished, he said, Good. That means they're worried. That means they know we're closing in. Keep the note. Everything they send is evidence. I slipped the threatening message into the same drawer as the forged contract and the bank statements. The drawer was beginning to feel like both a vault and a time bomb. By the weekend, Nina's article went live on a small independent site. When silence is exploited, a mother speaks against the faces of wealth. She didn't use our names yet, but the parallels were obvious. The story spread fast, shared by people who saw themselves in every line. Readers flooded the comments with outrage, with demands for accountability. My confession had been a spark. Nina's words poured gasoline on it, and Adrian noticed. That Sunday, as snow fell heavily against the city, my phone rang again. This time it was him. His voice was measured, careful, but I could hear the crack beneath. Mother, he said, what are you doing? You're ruining everything. For me, for the family, for yourself. Just stop. Take back what you said and this all goes away. I held the phone to my ear, my grip unshaking for once. I told the truth, and it won't go away, Adrian. Not anymore. There was a pause, then the faint clink of glass. His tone hardened. If you keep this up, you'll regret it. You don't understand the forces you're playing with. I ended the call before he could finish. My heart raced, but I did not cry. Instead, I looked out the window at the snow swirling under the streetlight. The days after Adrian's call unfolded like a grim rehearsal for a play I had never agreed to star in. Everywhere I went, I felt eyes on me. At first, I told myself it was paranoia, that my nerves were stretching reality into shadows. But then the shadows took form. One evening as I left the pharmacy, after another long shift, I noticed the same black sedan parked across the street. Its engine purred faintly in the cold, exhaust curling into the winter air. The driver never stepped out, never rolled down the window. He just sat there, waiting. The same car appeared the next night, and the one after. It followed me at a distance when I walked home, its headlights dimmed but never far. I clutched my coat tighter, each step quickening as the hair on my neck prickled. When I reached my apartment building, I turned suddenly. The sedan idled at the end of the block, its silhouette unmoving. I didn't wait to see more. I darted inside, slammed the door, and pressed my back against it, heart pounding. The next morning, I found another envelope waiting in my mailbox. No return address, no seal, just my name typed in sharp black letters. Inside was a single slip of paper, the words printed in bold, "You're embarrassing yourself. Walk away." I gripped the note so hard it tore in my fist. My humiliation at Christmas Eve had been public, designed to make me small. But this was different. This was a warning meant to corner me, to remind me of the power they thought they had. I called Harold immediately. He told me to keep the note, to file it alongside the others. His voice was calm, though I could sense his anger simmering beneath it. "Every threat strengthens your case," he reminded me. "They're digging their own grave." But logic did little to soothe the gnawing fear inside me. That night, I double-locked my door, pulled the curtains tight, and kept a lamp burning until dawn. Every creak in the hallway sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind rattling the window made me startle. By Saturday, exhaustion weighed on me like an anchor. I forced myself to leave for groceries, needing the normal rhythm of routine. The winter air bit at my cheeks as I walked, clutching a list written hastily on the back of a pharmacy receipt. I had just turned the corner when I heard footsteps behind me. Quick, deliberate, too close. I glanced back. A tall man in a black coat followed several paces behind. He wasn't rushing, but he wasn't slowing either. My pulse raced. I ducked into the grocery store, pretending calm as I grabbed items from the shelves: bread, milk, soup. But when I stepped back outside, he was there again, leaning casually against the wall, watching. I hurried down the block, my bag of groceries digging into my arm. The man followed until I reached my building. As I fumbled with the keys, he stopped at the corner, hands in his pockets, and waited until I disappeared inside. I dropped the groceries on the counter, my breath ragged. Rage mixed with fear, boiling inside me. This was no longer intimidation from a distance. This was a message written in footsteps, in shadows, in silence. They wanted me to feel hunted. I opened my drawer, the one where the evidence now lay. Bank statements, the forged contract, Clara's flash drive, the threatening notes. My entire life, my entire fight, sat in that drawer. I touched it as if grounding myself, as if reminding myself that the truth was heavier than fear. That evening, Nina called. Her voice was brisk, urgent. "Patricia, the story's moving. Bigger outlets are picking it up. People are connecting dots, even without names. It's spreading faster than I expected." I hesitated, the memory of the man in the black coat still sharp. "And if Adrian sees it?" "He's already seen it," she said flatly. "And he's scared. That's why the threats are getting bolder. They want you to stop because they know they can't spin this forever. Don't let them win. Stand firm. The world is listening." Her conviction steadied me more than she knew. After we hung up, I sat by the window watching the snow fall in thick sheets. Across the street, the black sedan appeared again, its headlights glowing faintly through the storm. But this time, I did not close the curtains. I stared back, unblinking, until the car finally pulled away. The fear was still there, heavy as ever. But so was something else. The humiliation that once silenced me had turned into something sharper. The notes, the cars, the footsteps. They were no longer just attempts to scare me. They were proof that Adrian and Isabella knew their world was cracking. The invitation arrived in a sleek black envelope, hand-delivered by a messenger in a tailored coat. Adrian had scrawled my name across the front in his practiced handwriting, the same script that had once signed my birthday cards and later appeared forged on contracts I never touched. Inside, a single card gleamed with embossed letters. Christmas Charity Gala, the Harlow Legacy Foundation, Private Club, 7 p.m. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. I knew immediately what it meant. Adrian and Isabella wanted to reclaim their image, to polish the cracks that my words had carved into their reputation. They wanted me back in place, smiling for the cameras, silent and pliant. But I also knew this night was my chance. With Harold's guidance, Nina's article already circulating, and Clara's evidence tucked in my bag, I wasn't walking into their world to play a role. I was walking in to end it. The club was all mahogany and velvet, chandeliers glowing above a sea of tailored suits and glittering gowns. Wealth clung to every corner, every laugh, every glass of champagne. As I stepped through the doors, heads turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through dry leaves. Some smiled politely, others looked away quickly. I was no longer the ornament everyone admired. I was the woman they had read about online, the one who had dared to speak. Adrian appeared first, his smile broad, his tuxedo immaculate. He kissed my cheek, his grip on my arm firm. "Mother," he said warmly, his voice pitched for the guests around us. "I'm so glad you came. Tonight is about family, about legacy, about us." Isabella followed, stunning in a gown of deep emerald silk, her diamonds catching the light like shards of ice. She leaned close, her lips brushing my ear. "Remember what I told you," she whispered. "One word out of place, and people will question whether you even know what you're saying." I pulled back, meeting her gaze. Her smile was perfect, but her eyes betrayed the steel beneath. The speeches began soon after. Adrian stood at the podium, raising a glass as cameras flashed. "This foundation," he declared, "is dedicated to honoring the woman who gave me everything. My mother. She is the reason we are here tonight, the symbol of what we stand for: generosity, family, and care." Polite applause filled the room. My stomach twisted at the irony, but as his words echoed through the hall, I rose from my chair. My knees shook, but my voice did not. "Generosity?" I said, loud enough for the microphones to catch. The room stilled, hundreds of eyes turning toward me. Adrian froze, his glass suspended in midair. Isabella's smile faltered. I stepped forward, pulling the folder from my bag. "You speak of generosity. You speak of care. But here's the truth." I held up the forged contract, the papers Clara had given me. "This is my signature, is it? This is the proof you fed to your donors, your partners, your friends? My name, stolen, my life turned into your shield. Not 1 cent of these so-called allowances ever reached me. Every dollar went to IH Holdings, your company, Isabella." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone's champagne glass shattered against the floor. Isabella's face drained of color, the emerald of her gown making her pallor more striking. Adrian stepped forward, his voice tight, desperate. "Mother, please, you don't understand. These are complicated agreements. You're confused." "I am not confused," I cut him off, my voice sharper than I had ever heard it. "I've worked 50-hour weeks for years to afford my medicine, while you told the world I lived in comfort. You made me a lie. And tonight, everyone here will see the truth." I placed the papers on the podium for all to see, the black ink stark beneath the lights. Then I pulled out the small recorder Harold had pressed into my hand earlier. "Do you remember our last conversation, Adrian? When you told me I was tired, mistaken, too old to understand? I recorded it. And now everyone will hear how you tried to erase me with your lies." The room erupted. Guests leaned forward, whispering, gasping, some raising phones to record. The calm veneer Adrian had carried for years cracked in an instant. He lunged toward me, his hand outstretched, but Isabella caught his arm, her own face twisted with fury. "You fool!" she hissed at him, her voice sharp enough that those closest heard. "You should have burned the files." That single sentence was all it took. The crowd surged with murmurs, witnesses to the mask slipping. Cameras flashed brighter, recording not the polished billionaire, but the panicked man and the unraveling woman beside him. I stood straighter, my breath steady. For years I stayed silent. Tonight I will not. No more lies, no more slogans. This is who they are, and I will not be their shield any longer. Harold, who had been standing discreetly at the back, stepped forward then, his presence calm but commanding. "Everything said here tonight is recorded. Every document is copied. This isn't just a family matter anymore. It's a case for the district attorney." Adrian's face went pale, his mouth opening and closing like a man drowning. Isabella gripped his arm, but her own composure had shattered. Around us, the glittering world of chandeliers and champagne had turned into a courtroom, the verdict delivered not by a judge, but by gasps and whispers and flashing cameras. The morning after the gala, the world outside my window no longer felt the same. Snow still blanketed the streets. The wind still rattled the thin panes of glass in my apartment, but inside me, something had shifted. The silence that had pressed down on me for years had cracked wide open, and I could feel the air of freedom rushing in. Nina's article went live at dawn. She had stayed up all night, pulling from every file, every email Clara had given us, every forged signature Harold had verified, every trembling word I had spoken into her recorder. The headline blazed across her site. "The Cost of Silence, How a Mother Was Exploited by the Faces of Wealth." Within hours, larger outlets picked it up. By midday, the story was on national broadcasts, my name and face finally attached to the truth. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold, my laptop glowing faintly as comments flooded in. Messages of outrage, messages of support. People who had read my words weeks ago on a quiet forum now watched my story unfold across television screens and newspapers. "She's brave. This happens to too many families. Justice for Patricia." Harold called mid-morning. His voice was brisk, edged with both relief and determination. "The district attorney's office has opened an inquiry. The IRS is reviewing the foundation accounts. I'm submitting every file today. Patricia, you did it. They can't bury this now." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. What will happen to them? Best case, fraud, tax evasion, elder abuse. Worst case, for them, it's prison. For you, it's vindication. When I hung up, I found myself trembling. Not from fear this time, but from release. The battle was no longer mine alone to carry. The law, the press, the people, they had taken up my burden. That evening, I walked outside into the snow. For weeks I had dreaded leaving my apartment, watching the black sedan idle by the curb, feeling the weight of eyes on my back. Tonight, the street was empty, silent except for the crunch of my boots against the ice. For the first time in a long while, I breathed without fear. I passed the pharmacy, its fluorescent lights buzzing softly against the dark sky. Inside, a younger woman was at the counter, her smile tired but kind as she rang up a customer. I thought of all the nights I had stood in her place, the endless hours, the aching feet, the weariness that never seemed to end. Soon, I told myself, I would not need to work those nights anymore. Not because my son had saved me, but because I had saved myself. When I returned home, I opened my laptop once more. My post on elder justice was still there, but now it was dwarfed by the flood of others who had joined me. Dozens of new stories. Dozens of voices no longer hiding. People thanking me. People telling their own truths. I scrolled until my eyes blurred, tears slipping down my cheeks. My pain had not only exposed Adrian and Isabella, it had unlocked something larger. I clicked into the comment box and began to type my final entry. I spoke because I was tired of humiliation. I spoke because silence is the weapon they use against us. My son tried to erase me. My daughter-in-law tried to control me. They used my name, my life, and my silence. But I am silent no more. To anyone reading this, your voice matters. Don't let them steal it. No more silence. I hit post and sat back, the words glowing on the screen. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a burden, or an ornament, or a slogan. I felt whole. The phone rang again later that night. It was Marcus, his voice rough with emotion. I saw you on the news, Patricia. You stood taller than any skyscraper in this city. I'm proud of you. Elaine called too, promising to visit soon, her voice warm and steady. Clara sent a short message. It's over. Thank you for finishing what I couldn't. One by one, voices from my past and present reached out, stitching a fabric of connection around me I hadn't felt in decades. And as I climbed into bed, pulling the quilt around my shoulders, I thought of Adrian and Isabella. I wondered if they sat together in some darkened room, their empire crumbling, their names now tied not to wealth, but to betrayal. Part of me ached still, for the boy Adrian had once been, for the son who had once held my hand. But the ache did not undo the truth. He had chosen greed, I had chosen truth. And tonight, truth had won. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thought to this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now showing on